And now, the Saxenian family presents Let's Rage Coogs, streaming on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. Gotta love that intro, Dan. I see a smile on your face every time you hear it. Luckily for us, it is on the heels of a good victory for the University of Houston Cougars football team after they finally did it. Not only they a lot of firsts in this game, not only did they finally not have a game go down to the final possession in a victory, Houston comes out victorious against the Navy Midshipmen, 38-20. Clayton Tune put together his best performance of the season. I think overall the offense by far had their best performance of the season. But joining me as always, Dayon Dunlap. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Got a good win. Looked good doing it for the most part. So I'm doing well. How about you guys?
I'm doing good. Joining us, Chris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review. First of all, thank you for allowing us to use your platform on the YouTube channel as well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. No, my pleasure to have you guys part of the family. So anything I can do to help to the coverage of UH athletics, I'm all for it.
Awesome. So let's get right into the game and let's start right with Clayton Tune's performance, because I think right there, that's the story of the game. Really overall, just how crisp the offense looked. And heading into the week, I think the big question that had kind of gotten brought up was just how is the offense going to look different after the flash that they showed in that fourth quarter against Memphis, where Clayton Tune was able to lead to 3 touchdown drives in that comeback. Well, Houston from the very get-go looked sharp on offense. It started off with that huge 20-plus yard completion to Tank Dell. They were able to effortlessly drive down the field, and it ended in a touchdown for Tank Dell. And really, it was just full steam ahead for Houston from there. When you look at Tune's overall game performance, he finished 21 of 30, 261 passing yards. He had 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, there's nothing much better you could have asked for the quarterback.
I'm gonna try to kind of steal Dayon's thunder because I'm really curious about his thoughts on it. Clayton Tune also had some moments I was like, oh man, you held onto the ball too long there, or things like that. So the numbers are great, touchdowns are great. He did some things that kind of surprised me. Giving up the sack fumble, which allowed Navy to score. Navy's not very good. This is one of those years that Navy does not have a lot of talent. So, but the game was close a little bit in the third quarter. The missed field goals by Navy, that helped as well. But you guys tell me. It looked like Houston was much more aggressive offensively, which we've been asking for weeks. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised about that. Me and Andy talked about that during the week, and I kind of figured they would be more aggressive passing early to kind of build a lead because, you know, Navy more than likely is going to win the time of possession battle. So you don't want to get behind, get against a team like Navy. And I think they came out and did that. But the main thing for me was consistency throughout the football game. They were consistently moving the ball, consistently completing passes, just consistently doing good things. He had time to throw. But there always going to be times, it seems like there's been where it's just like, come on. It's a Clay, come on, man moment. I would say that. Come on, man moment. And so, but other than that, that was the main thing that I took away. Like, they're consistently executing on offense, completing passes, getting yards, just getting positive plays to help sustain drives.
And they spread the ball around a lot in the offense. So that was also a thing we wanted to see for weeks. So that was good to see also.
Not only that, what I was going to say, when it comes to spreading around the ball, we saw Christian Trahan involved early in the first quarter, but we saw a couple of other tight ends involved too. Matt Burns, he got his first touchdown of the season. Stacey Sneed, who came in, he got a couple of passes in the receiving game, but he came in and was an excellent running back for Houston, especially after the fumble by Brandon Campbell. That it looked like a bit there. It might have been it could have led to momentum for Navy. It cut their deficit in half, but Stacey Sneed came in and had a very great game. He actually ended up rushing for 100 yards. He didn't score a touchdown, but I thought he was really good in the backfield.
And he did a good job bouncing outside when the middle was jammed up and either bouncing left or to the right to get those extra yards. So a lot of positives in the game. And as we see it on the screen there, the Cougs moved above 500. They're now 4-3.
2-1 in conference play, which is the most important thing.
That's important because the players still have their goal within sight to get to the conference championship game. Navy, I'm not sure how much to I won't read it too much into it. I want to be Donald Downer on this performance because a win is a win. They did what they had to do. They beat a team they're better than. Let's put it like that. Okay, but I think there are better teams in the conference than Navy. It'd have been disastrous if the Cougs would have lost today to Navy, but they didn't. They won by 18 points. They did enough to get the job done. Clayton Tune, 5 TD passes. So let's be happy with the win and move on to next week. And fellas, I think next week is homecoming, right?
Yep.
Yes, sir. Against South Florida.
Yep. And I want to piggyback on a few things that Chris said that I agree with. It was exactly what Snead had great vision today, showed great explosion whenever he picked his hole and got out in the open field. And also the second thing was they just beat a team that they're better than.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't really take much stock into it outside of doing what you was expected to do. And sometimes it isn't always as easy said than done. So I'm going to, like Chris, I'm going to give them credit. And that's how it looked. They just, up front, they were better. Offensive line, defensive line. Clayton Tune had plenty of time to throw the football. And then the skill positions, from cornerback to receiver, we were just better overall. So just like Chris said, I mean, good win, but let's move on to the next point. And one thing that they did good against Memphis, what they did this week was spreading the ball around. I mean, like Trey Hand got involved, Brown got involved. He had 2 touchdowns. He had over 100 yards last week. And so I like that because you're still going to need more threats outside of Tank Dell.
And I want to ask you, Andy, before we get any further, is this an indication of Coach Holgorsen calling on more of the plays, or Coach Dawson opening up the playbook?
Well, that's a good question. That's something that we're going to need to follow up on Monday, because the TV broadcast kind of slipped that in there, and I'm not sure if they just said it in general, but I think I can't remember if it was towards the first or second quarters, but they kind of said that Holgorsen was the one calling plays. Now, I don't know if they just meant it in general that he's the one that oversees the offense. We haven't heard anything from Dana Holgorsen specifically since the bye that he has taken over play calling duties. But it does look like they are just, again, going back to what Clayton Tune said earlier this week leading up to the game, they look much more comfortable passing the ball. Now, give credit to the offensive line, because throughout the entire season, we've really homered on how they've struggled throughout the season, especially when it comes to blocking. And I know, Chris, you mentioned how difficult it is, or how there were a couple of times where Tune probably held the ball a little bit too long, especially on that fumble, the strip sack. But I think that's kind of a byproduct of the great job that the offensive line was able to do, at least against Navy. There was multiple times when Clayton Tune had all day to throw. 5-10 seconds, he could have counted where each receiver was. He knew exactly what play was developing, and he had more than enough time to be able to find his receivers. And I think that's really what benefited him and made him look so good. That's something that's been the conversation. When Clayton Tune has time, he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Now, that's been the big question all season long. There's been times when he hasn't been able to have time, and sometimes he does end up holding the ball too much that it hurts him. But I think against Navy, that was a big plus for the offensive line.
A big plus, but hold on now, Andy. He's had time throughout the season. That hasn't been the issue, that he just hasn't had time. He hasn't just looked good because he hasn't.
Not all the time, but I'm saying there's been moments.
Well, and today, some of that O-line credit was Navy rushed 3 people. So they dropped 8 back. Navy had a lot of success, for them when they blitzed, when they run blitzed, or they gave different looks, sent the DB from the weak side, because there were some times when the Coogs missed the blitz pickup, didn't pick it up, and those are issues. So Navy does not have the personnel to do that more often, because it was successful, somewhat for them. But I think the stat was Navy had given up coming into the game 20-yard or more play 31 times so far before today's game, and they did more today when the Cougs beat them with big plays. So Navy their defense is not good enough, in spurts consistently. But That's Navy's problem. This is the Let's Rage Cougs. We're going to talk about the Cougs getting this win, 38-20, to improve to 4-3 overall and 2-1 in conference.
And yet, and something to this credit, I mean, now that we'll switch gears a little bit, kind of head into the next segment, but let's flip it around and focus on the job that the Houston defense did, because again, going back to leading into the week and kind of really going back before the bye week, how big that win was for Houston against Memphis. Something that Donovan Mutin said leading up to the week on Tuesday was that win against Memphis did a lot for the Cougars' confidence, just in terms of being able to show that they have the confidence in themselves to be the team that they were expected to be heading into the season. Now, obviously, the first 6 games was a lot of adversity, was a lot of up and downs, particularly for the defense in late game situations, not being able to make the play that seals the win. They had a chance against Texas Tech. They had a chance again against Tulane. And we all know how Kansas was able to really run all over the Houston defense in that game. Against Memphis. They were able to multiple times, just looking at the fourth quarter and in that game overall, after the first quarter, they gave up those 2 touchdowns. They were able to hold them to field goals the rest of the way, and particularly in the fourth quarter when Houston made that comeback, they were really pivotal. And to end that game with the sack, to not even give Memphis the opportunity to drive down the field and either be in a position to kick a game-winning field goal, I think that was huge. And I think you saw a lot of that swagger now. Again, Chris, like you mentioned, it was Navy. But Houston looked like they, were really, really disciplined. They didn't allow any of those options or play actions, and all the trickery that Navy likes to do schematically really hurt them. There was a couple of times when Navy would have chunk plays, but that's going to happen over the course of the game. I think this is by far the best game that the defense had overall, and 14 of those 20 points that they gave up, or really 7 of those 14 or 13 points that they gave up, they were on the defense, but one of them came off a short field off the fumble from Brandon Campbell, and then, or it wasn't a short field, but it was off the fumble by Brandon Campbell, and then the other was the other was on the bomb that they gave up late in the fourth quarter towards the end of the game, and then obviously, of course, the scoop and score that Navy had. So I think overall this performance by the Houston defense was the best it's been all season.
And let's also say, I think you guys correct me if I'm wrong when I say this. Only 4 penalties for the Cougs today. That's got to be the best number so far this season, right?
It is by far. The previous best was 7 against Memphis this past week. So again, another step heading in the right direction.
So that's good. Go ahead, Dana.
No, I'm just going to piggyback off Andy when he talked about the defense. Yeah, they really played well. They were consistently good as well. Being able to stifle the run game. And really what stuck out to me was the play their defensive backs were able to make, and especially that interception, the second interception. That one was very impressive. Just simple man-to-man coverage, stifling the run. And then DB just made a play. And they tackled well. Normally,
yes.
when you give up a lot of yards against Navy, it's normally because of missed tackles. But they really tackled well today. And they did a great job. I mean, I think this, like Andy said, I think this probably was one of their best games they put together on film this year.
Navy had 50 carries for 200 yards. That's 4 yards to carry. That is a solid defense. That's solid defense.
And kind of to go some of the things that are one of the emphasis that Dana Holgorsen mentioned about time of possession. Navy won that time of possession, to add on to your point, Chris. So the Houston defense was out there a lot during the game, and there was really not much that the Midshipmen could do on a consistent basis. In particular, whenever they had to go off without no momentum, without off turnover, without having to go the distance, Houston's defense was really good. The Navy Midshipmen were not in the red zone a single time in this game against Houston, which is just absurd to think about. And there was a couple of times on the 4th down where they were able to stuff the Midshipmen out and really cause a lot of turnover on downs and just not give them any momentum, which is something, like we mentioned, there's been times where, and this is for the entire team, not just the offense, but where they've had lapses that allows opposing teams to be able to go on these drives, maybe that helps turn the tide in the game. That was not really the case against Navy. And Dan, you mentioned the 2 interceptions that Houston had. They also had, they only had 1 sack, but they also had 7 tackles for loss. 7 tackles for loss, and I think overall the defensive line for Houston did a really good job. And we talked about it on our Pod Simon Jamma podcast, the battle in the trenches. I think the Houston defense and Houston's offensive line, they did a really good job of dominating up front,
which allowed Donovan Newton to get 13 tackles, 5 solo.
Mm-hmm.
When the defensive line, especially against Navy, in that option is you get the pressure up front, and everybody maintains their gaps and their assignments. It makes it much easier for the linebackers and safeties to fill and tackle. And there were not a lot of missed tackles in today's game, as Deion touched on it, which is another positive step in the right direction for the Cougs defense, because we saw that a lot in the previous games this season. So a lot of positives to build on going forward. We can talk about it more. Homecoming next Saturday. We're all alums here. I think we got alums tuning in and watching the show on all the platforms. So we can get into that more. And how big a deal is this win, Andy? Dayon?
I think it's big in the sense of it keeps you in the running to potentially make a conference championship game. And so I think in that sense, it's big because, I mean, I don't want to say easily, but it could have been a loss. And it would have been just as big of a loss as a big of a win is. So I think you got to celebrate your wins one win at a time. And so I think it's key, because you lose this game, then you most likely are done. And so they took care of business. I mean, it's good to win a team. You're better than a team. You look like it, and you execute. And so I got to give them credit for actually looking like the better team, playing like the better team, getting the penalties down. They actually looked fresh this week. And to me, it looked like Coach Holgorsen was calling plays. He had his play sheet. You saw him talking multiple times. And so, I mean, it's good to see him doing that, because the offense has struggled. And if that's your specialty, if he was doing that, hasn't been confirmed, then I think that's a good adjustment during a bye week that he would made or should have made, in my opinion.
It was a workmanlike win, and that's important, because we could quibble about, well, the red zone struggles. It took them a lot longer to score down close in the red zone area, and things that they weren't able to punch it in off the first play, and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Things to work on. They got the win, won by 18 points. They did what they're supposed to do. Clayton Tune had his best game of the season. 5 touchdowns, no picks. He did have the one sack fumble. But overall, he played well, and I think it's something to build on. And now I'm going to be picky / petty, Dayon and Andy. Next week's a home game, right?
Yes, sir.
Home game, homecoming. Decent opponent in South Florida. How many Cougs will fill the stadium next Saturday?
Our predictions, if I had to predict, I would say somewhere in between 25,000, I'd say.
25,000. Dan, what you say?
25,000 sounds like a lot.
But it's not. But it is.
Sounds like a lot, I guess it's not a lot. What's the capacity? 40,000.
40,000.
Yeah.
40,000.
Yeah, I'd say anywhere from 20 to 25.
Wow.
And I will say that I'm
going to be positive. I'm going to be positive. It's going to be close to 30,000.
Really?
Call me
the attendance against Tulane was just over 24,000, so that'd be a big step. Again, they had over 30,000 in that home opener against Kansas, so that would be pretty big if they were able to lock in and get 30,000. Real quickly before we transition, I did want to talk one final point about the defense, and then overall, just when it comes to the turnovers that they were able to get, especially in the secondary. We know how they were coming in shorthanded just in terms of the injuries, especially the biggest one to Alex Hogan is going to be out for the season, is what Dana Holgorsen has said. Those 2 interceptions by Gervarius Owens and by Art Green, I think they were hopefully it's something that continues to build momentum, like something I mentioned the play of the defensive line heading into this game and what they were able to do against Navy. I think that's something that hopefully can spark a lot of benefit for a lot of those defensive backs, especially Jace Rogers, who continues to, he continues his positive play. He had the 100-yard return kickoff against Memphis 2 weeks ago, and now he gets an interception in this game. So hopefully he continues to make plays and get his name out there.
And I think TV time has not been announced yet for next Saturday, right?
No, ESPN, they are waiting. I can't remember the specific thing of it, where they're like have the
I'm thinking they were
flexibility.
early
Yeah,
It's
game.
either going to be
tomorrow, Monday, I think. Yeah.
it's either going to be
11:30.
yeah, it's either going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff or 2:30 p.m. kickoff. If it's at 2 or 2:30, it'll be on ESPN Plus. If it's 11 a.m., it'll be on ESPNU, I believe, was the last I remember of the check. So we'll still have to see about that, but we will transition back to the offense and we will bring up the Hoop and Holler banner here, who will be sponsoring the next two segments. We'd like to thank them, the Houston Cougars Sports Micro Collective, that they are the entity behind the Star Pizza commercials, which you will see in a moment later on in the show. So big props to them for being able to be one of the sponsors of the show. And obviously, of course, big props to our main sponsor, our primary sponsor, the Saxenian family, who has supported us for 5 football games of the season following the initial 4 to start off the year. I'd like to take this time to be to kind of self-plug that we are still looking for sponsors for the remaining football games of the season, for the final 4 football games of the season, not counting any postseason action, which, yes, Chris, Houston, now that they are 4-3, they are only 2 games away from being bowl eligible.
Two wins.
2 wins away. 2 wins, not 2 games. 2 wins. You're right. That's a very good caveat from being bowl eligible, which well, that would make them postseason eligible. So once again, if you're interested in sponsoring Let's Rage Coogs, feel free to contact us at you see it on the ticker at letsragecoogs@gmail.com. Oh, and obviously, of course, we are now less than 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from the tip off of the men's basketball season. They tip off on November 7th against Northern Colorado. So that's going to be another hot ticket. And you don't want to miss it. So be a part of being a sponsor with Let's Reach Cougs. And on that note, I said we we're going to transition back to the offense. I want to focus in particular when it comes to the receivers group, because especially early on, we had Tank Dell was carving up Navy. The midshipman had no answer for Tank, and he was able to score those 2 touchdowns early. But I think most importantly, and it's something that we've touched on in the past in our podcast day on, how important it is to be able to get a lot of other receivers to get out there, and specifically Sam Brown, who had 2 touchdowns of his own. He's starting to really come into his own. But Keyshawn Carter, he had one heck of a catch towards the middle of the game where it looked like the ball was in the air. He was able to adjust and come up with the big catch, and obviously a play or two later, it ended up in the fumble by Brandon Campbell. But that was just a heck of a catch. And again, that's what you want to see if you're Houston. A lot of these other receivers starting to make plays and show that they can be out there and give defenses, not allow them to be able to focus solely on Tank Dell.
Yep, and that was something I think I mentioned a little bit, but you're right. I think Brown has had a coming out part the last 2 games against Memphis. He had over 100 yards today. He had 2 touchdowns, and he's really winning one-on-one. He definitely looks like a good receiver, that I should say, coming over from West Virginia. He definitely looks like a playmaker, and I think we need to keep giving him involved. He's one of the players who looks like he can consistently make plays whenever he gets one-on-one coverage. And Carter, he stepped up again. I think the last 2 games have been big for him as well. And he's grown. He played a lot of football. And so I'm not surprised to see him, Clayton, go to him in big situations, key downs, and him be prepared and be good enough to make the plays. Of all the receivers play good, they got Trey Hand involved early. I think he's a valuable piece because he kind of opens up the field for them if you can show his threat in the middle of the field. But also, like, I know they were aggressive early on, but they still were balanced and not just pass happy. They still had a good balanced attack, and Snead really played well with over 100 yards rushing, as you see on your screen. And so I still like the balanced attack. It was still like the versatility in their offense, and although it's an air raid system.
34 carries, 21 passes, 6 different players caught a pass. That's what Coach Holgorsen wants. He doesn't want to he preferred, let me say it like that, he preferred not to have to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game and to run the ball more and give the defense a chance to catch their breath on the sideline and just pound the ball. So I think this is what, I mean, they had the Cougs' average carry was 5.3 yards per rush. So that's more than Navy. How many folks would think that, for Navy to win games, they'd have to win the average rushing totals. They didn't. So another good sign for the Cougs offense and the Cougs defense.
Absolutely, and I think that's the key right there, Dayon. Like you said, that balance, something that Dana Holgorsen has preached, and it's huge. And I think the most important thing is a lot of decisiveness with a lot of plays, where especially in regards to Clayton Tune specifically, he was able to not only the good passing game that he had, but he also rushed it 9 times. He was able to get 43 yards, and a couple of those rushes, they were design runs, and they came in crucial moments to be able to help pick up first downs, and it added that extra layer versatility to the Houston offense that gave Navy fits, because a lot of Clayton Tune's run came on pivotal points, whether it was a third down. I think there was one that even came on a 4th-and-1 situation towards close to the goal line. So they did a good job, again, to that versatility and kind of keeping Navy, for the cliche, on their toes and not being able to know exactly what was coming next. And I think that's really what benefited Houston in this game.
And again, I'm going to say it. It's Navy. We understand that. Tony M, Kickface, King, who are tuning in on the YouTube channel. But it's a win. Wow. Cincinnati held on to beat SMU. Look at the final score there. It's 29-27. So
they continue to win.
They continue to win. They're still undefeated, I think, the Bearcats, to be the class of the division. And look at this, Tulane. How about this, guys? Question for you. Did the Cougs come from behind, win over Memphis, zap Memphis for the rest of the season? Because they're now trailing Tulane 21-0 in the first quarter. In the first quarter. And that come from behind was a great win for the Cougs and a big loss for Memphis. And to borrow from our good buddy, Galen Robinson Jr., it's always good when Memphis loses.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, and honestly, I think it did, because we got to see them. Not only that, but they followed up that Houston game with another tough battle against East Carolina. I believe that game went to overtime. So they've had back-to-back games that are really draining, and they came away with losses in both of those games. Now, give credit to Tulane, because they are as good as advertised. I mean, we saw Houston fans got to see the Green Wave up close and personal. I mean, that was without their starting quarterback, and without their backup to the quarterback.
Yes,
so
yep.
we don't have to go back there for Houston fans when it comes to what happened in that game. But again, going back to Houston, it's another that Tulane game, it was a big loss, just because it was an opportunity to be able to take advantage and have that tiebreaker, because Tulane, a healthy Tulane team, looks as good as advertised. Now, I think the important thing for Houston that they're going to have going for them, UCF, Cincinnati, who, like you mentioned, just won. Tulane is up 21-0, and I need to check when UCF plays. But all three of those teams, they're going to play each other down the stretch in the season, and UCF is not going to kick off until later today at 6:30 p.m. against East Carolina. So that's going to be an interesting battle for UCF. But those three teams at the top are going to play each other. So at the minimum, one of those teams, no, actually at the minimum, all three of them play each other. The second place team is going to have 2 losses in conference at minimum, if I'm doing this correctly,
Yep.
which means that Houston has a window there if they can take care of business, which I think it's more important. We'll talk about it on the other side of the segment about how important it is to not only this win against Navy in particular, but to be able to do it in the fashion they did. Don't go anywhere. You're listening or watching to Let's Rage Coogs live on the Houston Raw Bar Review YouTube channel.
Thank you for calling Star Pizza. This is Tim. How may I help you?
This is D.A. Jones. I'm calling to order some pizza.
Hey, Mr. Jones. Same order as last time?
Same order as last time.
Okay, and the delivery address?
Man, we over on Sac Ave.
Sac Avenue? Let me see if we even deliver there.
We right here on your map.
All right, we'll see you in about 45 minutes to an hour.
Hurry up. We hungry.
I'm hungry, man. We the best pizza on Sac Ave.
I'm okay though.
Once again, major props to our sponsor, In-Star Pizza, like you saw right there. The Hoop and Holler Houston Semi-Collective, they are the entity behind that commercial that you saw there. So be sure to give them a follow on Twitter at Hoop and Holler. Now, it's the interesting way that you phrase it on Twitter is at HOOP, the letter N, HOLLERHOU on Twitter. Once again, they are the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials. Kind of shifting the conversation back to Houston. Not everything was perfect in the win for Houston. I think in particular, coming out of halftime, it really looked like Houston let go of the gas there with just costly mistakes, the back-to-back fumbles, in particular, especially the one on Tank Dell where, really he just got flat out stripped after a good completion, and give credit to Navy. They were able to do a good job of being able to force those fumbles. Fortunately for Houston in that one in particular, the one by Tank Dell, it resulted in a botched, or not even a botch, it's just a missed field goal by Navy. But then on the following drive, I think it was on the kickoff return where Jace Rogers fumbled and they recovered. Or I might not be remembering correctly, but I know Jace Rogers
that was weird.
fumbled. I know he fumbled during the kickoff. They were able to recover, and then Clayton Tune also had the strip sack that resulted straight in the points for Navy. And I mean, it was in the third quarter. Dana Holgorsen was frustrated. Obviously, they showed him in the sidelines again. But that right there, they were playing a team that was much more, to be flat out, they had much more talent. That would make Houston pay, and we could be talking about a much different ball game. Again, coming out of the half, really something that's just more mental lapse. And when it comes to not being able to have ball security, it's not like there were interceptions. This is just simply holding on to the ball.
Yep, a better team would have taken advantage of that, and Navy's not. But let me say this, and Dan can add his 3 cents. Did y'all catch it? Correct me. Did I hear this correctly? The announcer said when the score was 21-14, that if Navy would have made their 2 missed field goals, the game would be tied.
They said something along those lines, but I cannot remember they meant both of the field goals, which if they did, obviously right there, they were off by a point. But they did say something along those lines.
Because they had a problem with the score a few times throughout the ball game, I thought. But anyway, Dan, what were you going to say, my man?
No. I was just agreeing with what you. I was just agreeing with what you were saying. What Andy had just said right before you had started.
Right, and is that something that should be cause for concern heading into the remainder of the conference games? Because I think that it's not that the Houston players can't secure the ball. That's just something when it comes to mental lapse that going back to that inconsistency, it seems like they got comfortable after halftime. They were leading by double digits against Navy, and it seemed like a mental lapse from the outside perspective. What say y'all?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if you could call it mental lapse. It was definitely something that they can control. It was within their control, and like Chris said, a better team would have capitalized off those mistakes because it would happen back to back. In which, if they would have scored, I don't remember what the score was at that time, but if they would have scored back to back touchdowns, they'd have been right back in the game. And so things like that you can't have just in any football game. Luckily, the defense play how they play, but a better team definitely would have took advantage of that. And those are mistakes that Houston can't have, especially when you play against better teams, a la in the Big 12.
And when it happened, I'll be honest, I really thought to myself, "Oh no, here it goes again."
Same.
Here it goes. The first half was good. They're doing reverse. First half was good today, and they're struggling in the third quarter. That's what I thought, but they did enough. They got it done. They pulled away to get the win by 18 points. So it was just a hiccup in that third quarter. So it wasn't a major deal. It did not cost the game. So we could talk about it. Hopefully it's just one of those things that, bad luck, bad bounces, and move on with the W, be happy with it.
No, but real quickly, Dayon, to answer your question about what the score was, it was 21-7 when the first strip happened to Tank Dell and then led to the missed field goal. Then off the strip sack that led to scoop and score for Navy. That made it 21-14. So again, right there, it kind of, like you said, Chris, give credit to Houston. They they were able to shake it off and not necessarily allow them to continue to bog them down like we have seen in the past, where an interception here, a turnover there, kind of completely changes the script of a game. We've seen that in the past. In particular, I mean, going back to the Kansas game, I believe they were up 14. I think it was 14-7, and then Clayton 2 in the interception kind of ignited the big run that the Kansas Jayhawks did in that game. So kudos to Houston to be able to put that in the rearview mirror and not allow them to continue to affect them. Now, I put this comment up earlier, Chris. MH says he heard the exact same thing too. So there you have it. 2 field goals would have made it 21-20, not 21-21, Chris, but you have it right there. Anything else in terms of the offense's performance in particular? Maybe something about the tight end production, like we mentioned, and something that we've hammered throughout the point of this show, in particular when it comes to Christian Trahan and how earlier in the game or earlier in the season, the production wasn't really there when it came to catches. Now he only had 1 catch today for 28 yards. It came in the first quarter. He had a couple of targets early on in that first drive. But again, I think in particular when it comes to the versatility, I mentioned Matt Burns, who picked up his first touchdown of the season. He had 2 catches for 34 yards. I think it's a great sign that Houston is, again, going back to that versatility, is using a lot more of their weapons, which is something that we've called for in the past on this show, something the fans have mentioned. And I think it just adds that extra layer for the Houston offense.
Agreed. And I mean, what we're doing is being picky. But honestly, this is game 7. Why did it take game 7 to diversify the offense? To go to Trahan, Matt Burns, I mean, injuries. I think maybe that's what it is. Some injuries
Christian Trahan has been dealing with an injury.
But to the receiving core, it's opened up the offense for other players. But it just seems like the coaching staff has finally made a conscious effort to get more folks involved and include the tight ends in the play calling. Hopefully it's not too little too late. I mean, the conference championship is still within reach, getting there. It's still within reach. But come on, man. I mean, all the fans, many fans from game 1. And I think you remember it, got the messages to prove it directly about why aren't they getting the ball to the tight end? That was game 1. So fans saw it. Fans questioned it. I guess we should be glad that it's happening now, and you still have 5 more games left in the regular season.
Yeah, and when it comes to Christian Trahan specifically, I mean, Dana Holgorsen talked about him leading up during his Monday weekly news conference. He said that, well, I mean, he called Christian Trahan Mr. Consistency. And the important thing that I can't remember if it was you, Chris, or James that brought it up, but he has an established rapport with Clayton Tune, that connection that they have in the past with what they've been able to build. Now, he did mention that Trahan has been dealing with back issues early on in the season I mean, that could be a big reason why he wasn't involved as much in the passing game, in particular early on in the season. But again, you're seeing that now that they have much more weapons around him. It's not just Christian Trahan, but Matt Burns was able to step in, make a couple of big plays. And certainly, at least during the first 4 games of the season, it didn't seem like the tight end position was much of a factor for Houston in the passing game.
Yeah, and I'm like Chris. I'm like, why is just now some of these adjustments being made? I mean, although you got to give credit for making them, but some of the things have been going on throughout the first 4 or 5 games. And so, I mean, I guess the bye week has done well for not only the players; they look fresh, but as well as for Coach Holgorsen as well. And so, I mean, it's not you beat. I'm like, I mean, you beat Navy. I mean, good job. You took care of business, but not really much to just write home about. Clayton he looked really good. I'm gonna give him his credit. He looked good outside of a couple plays, but other than that, he looked well.
And we could be saying this same thing next Saturday. South Florida's 1-6, so they're not great shakes either. But it's up to the Cougs to have another workmanlike performance and get the W, win homecoming, send everybody home, send the Coug fans home happy, and then just continue moving down the line and get closer and closer to the goal of reaching the conference championship game. But Andy and Dayon, Tulane, because Andy, you mentioned that Tulane plays UCF and Cincinnati to the last 2 of their last 3 games. If Tulane just splits those 2, because they beat the Cougs, they should qualify to represent, a spot in the bowl game, in the conference championship game. If they lose both of them, they'll have 2 losses. As long as the Cougs win the rest of theirs, well, hey,
Yeah,
there we go.
That's the thing. Houston is in a position where if they take care of business now, I think the toughest, looking at Houston's schedule specifically, the toughest game remaining on the list could arguably be at SMU. I think that at East Carolina game on November 19th is up there in terms of the 2 toughest challenging games remaining for Houston. But that's a great point, Chris. They, after as much of a crazy season that they've had, as much of an inconsistent season that they had, are in a position where they can make run. And if they take care of business like they did today against Navy, to be flat out honest, against inferior opponents that Houston should beat, then they're going to have a chance to set out and do a lot of the goals that they've been talking about since training camp, which obviously they had all the hype coming into the season about potentially being one of those New Year's Six representatives. And there were some national pundits talking of having them as high as potentially competing for a college football playoff spot. Those expectations are long gone in terms of being that highly ranked nationally, but it's still part to be able to salvage the biggest goal, which is being able to walk off the final year in the American Athletic Conference with a conference championship.
One thing that I think it hasn't hurt the momentum with the season playing out how it has so far is recruiting. They just got a big recruit, another big receiver. I can't remember his name right off the top.
Jonah Wilson, yeah.
Yeah. And so it definitely hasn't hurt the recruiting because he had some big time offers for some other big time programs. And so a lot of young talent still making plays. Sneed on the offensive end. A lot of the old young offensive linemen are young. And Andy, you mentioned how the broadcast said they might have saw Coley today. And so I can't help but wonder what the future looks like as far as all of the young talent they're accumulated and continue to get in recruiting and see what they bring them in. And so the future is optimistic as far as because they're getting talent, but developing them and putting it all together is a whole another task at hand, I should say.
And let me say this. I'm gonna, I guess, sounds strange the way I'm gonna phrase it, but kind of fall on my sword. But it looks like the players have not given up on Coach Holgorsen. Okay, that wasn't questioned by not just me. The comeback win against Memphis, the offense, the third quarter blips today against Navy. They didn't collapse. They didn't point fingers. They held it together today, and they won by 18 points. So those look like positives that the locker room is still intact. So that's great to see because, this conference is not great. Let's be honest. It's not a great conference, but it's still up on the Cougs to win the games they need to win. And today was one of those games. Next Saturday, homecoming is another one. And they do that, beat USF, they're 3-1, halfway there. And then they get some help from somebody else. They still have a very good chance to be playing in the AAC championship game, which the players say is their goal. Now, let's ask the fans if a berth in the AAC title game would be enough to salvage this season, or would it still be a disappointment?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to hear from King Jaja, MH, or Daniel Satterfield, who I don't know if that's his name, Daniel Satterfield, Knoxville, or if he's in Knoxville, but he's chiming in there. Go Coogs, great win for Houston. While we wait to hopefully see some responses from some of our viewers on YouTube, I do want to bring up this great point, something that we kind of touched on earlier in the first segment, but haven't really focused on. Stacey Sneed looked really good in this game against Navy, and what MH said, he looked a lot more confident, had some great jukes, and saw lots of improvement in the run game. And
he did have some great jukes. He did.
Kudos to him. He made the best out of his opportunity because really we saw a lot more of him after Brandon Campbell's fumble, and he took advantage of it, and really he made the most of that opportunity.
He did, and he looked explosive. One time, right close to the line of scrimmage, he made a spin move and got out in the open field and had to hit that 1-2, what I call the 1-2, on another defender on the outside, and he looked really explosive. People talked about his speed throughout the entire offseason, so you could definitely see his explosion, and he also showed his elusiveness today. And so big ups to Sneed, and he's one of these young players who I'm talking about. From Sneed to Brown to Golden, who is out. You still got Manjack and all the young talent that's accumulated specifically on the skill positions. I want to see what the young quarterbacks look like, but that's another story for another day.
Jeff Purdue just chimed in, said Tulane and UCF will play in the title game, according to Jeff Purdue in his predictions. Which, again, I could possibly see it. Now, the thing is that Tulane, UCF, and Cincinnati all play against each other, so that would be one interesting way if that shook out, especially Tulane. I mean, that would have been a dark horse coming into the season. No one would have thought that Tulane, but give credit to Willie Fritz and what he's been able to build down in New Orleans. King Jaja chimed in. He said an AAC championship game plus a bowl win would be a step in the right direction. Interesting. Well, he flat out said it: a game win plus a bowl win, not just an appearance plus a bowl win, which is what they did a season ago. So that I agree with King Jaja. That would be especially the way the first 6 games turned out. That would be a major success for Houston in this season now.
And a big surprise to all of us. I think after the start to the season, that would be a great way to end time in the AAC and head to the Big 12. That would be.
I think the biggest reason why it would be a surprise is because Houston, if they are able to win out and they do get into that championship game, are going to play one of either UCF, Cincinnati, and Tulane. We already saw that they lost to Tulane, so Tulane has a head-to-head tiebreaker with Houston. But yeah, I agree. That would be one amazing turnaround, and it would be a big plus for what Houston has been able to do. On one final note, I will transition to a comment, but real quickly, I do just want to give a shout out to, once again, Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Semi-Collective, for being one of the sponsors of this show in particular, and they've been a sponsor all season long, so give huge props to them to be able to, once again, be one of the entities that kind of took a chance on us early and have been consistently been a sponsor of the show, a friend of the show. And once again, we like to take this opportunity to take advantage and self-plug. If you are interested in sponsoring Let's Rage Coogs in the future, whether it be for the remaining football games, any potential bowl postseason games when it comes to football specifically, or men's basketball down the road, we do have a primary sponsor for the first 5 men's basketball games of the season. The big non-conference game that is still open is that Alabama game, December 8th at Fertitta Center. If I have that date correct, December 8th is when Houston will play Alabama, I believe. And actually, let me make sure I have that date correct. December 10th is the date when Houston is going to play Alabama at Fertitta Center. That's going to be the big non-conference game. So sponsorship spots for Let's Rage Coogs on that game are still open. And if you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow us on social media at Let's Rage Coogs on TikTok and Instagram, and on Pod Slamma Jamma on Twitter, like you see it on the screen, PAWDSLAMAJAMA. And on that note, once again, thanks Hoop and Holler for their sponsorship of the show. Dan, you've mentioned it throughout. You're excited to see some of the other quarterbacks on the Houston roster. And I do want to point out, because this was an interesting comment that was brought up by the broadcast crew, the ESPNU broadcast crew. They said that they expected to see some of Lucas Cooley, who was a transfer from Arkansas that transferred to Houston over the offseason, that really he got a lot of attention when he did decided to commit or to transfer over to Houston, just in terms of what potentially he could be potentially the quarterback of the future for Houston in the Big 12. And I think I found it interesting. I'd be interesting to hear from some of our viewers, some of our listeners, what they thought of there. They said that they expected to potentially see Cooley late in the game when Houston, it was clear they were going to win. But correct me if I'm wrong, I heard them say that they potentially had a Cooley package or something like that the TV broadcast said.
I didn't hear that part of the package, but you guys help me with this. Does the 4 games still apply? If you don't play more than 4 games, you get redshirt?
Yeah.
That rule still applies.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's possible for what the Cougs want to do, because I think we have heard that he would be the redshirt, be redshirted going forward, in this season. But if he came in to mop up today, they'll not hurt his redshirt status. There's a package for him. That would be kind of strange. they have a package designed for him, because why would you give him a package if you're not going to really play him a lot to close out the season? But maybe they are. Who knows? I don't know about that one. Ask him about that on Monday, Andy.
Yeah, and I think the four, what Chris just alluded to, probably is something they're considering. And I'm wondering, his first and last year at Arkansas, he didn't play. Did he get the redshirt year, or was that the COVID year? Did he get the COVID year? So he still has all 4 years
The
as
Coug.
He's a redshirt freshman for
Yeah.
Houston, so
he's a redshirt freshman. So okay, so that redshirt freshman did count this year. And so to Chris's question, I don't know if the full rule still applies to him since he already has used the red shirt.
mhm.
And so that, but I would love to. I just want to see what the future holds. I mean, of course, I want him to keep playing and keep winning. If Clayton Tune does that, but I'm just looking forward to the future, and specifically at the quarterback position, because it's so vital. And Clayton Tune, I mean, he's done good, but he's only going to be here this last year. Thank God. No.
Oh, damn, good.
No, I'm joking.
I think
that was just subconscious coming out, Dayon.
on that note, I do, King Judge, I'll pose a question. I do wonder what the quarterback situation would be next season. Would it be Coogie's job, or would it be another transfer quarterback to come in? I think in particular the reason that little mention, and honestly I don't know if I'm just misremembering when I heard that part about the package when it comes to the TV broadcast. I have to go back and make sure they did say that, but they did mention Coogie's name, at least in that cleanup role, which I found interesting because multiple times throughout the season, Dana Holgorsen has said that quarterback 2 for this team this season is Coleman Edwards. So for me, it was just interesting that they even mentioned his name at all. It could be something much ado about nothing, to be quite honest, when it comes to what they mentioned in the TV broadcast, but certainly it's something that caught my attention when they heard. Down.
Before you move on, I think some of that could be when they talk to the coaches in their meeting before the game, and so some of that they could be getting, and so it's definitely probably something to ask at the next press, whether he would be truthful about it, or might not want to give it up to put it on the scale on the minds of their opponents. So it's respectable, and so, but I think that's something they really did consider, and maybe they'd expected to win big, and they had a package for him specifically for this game if they did get up big. But whatever it is, I can't wait to see what some of these young quarterbacks look like.
And on that note, we'll transition to our final segment of the show, and we'll go kind of tie a bow, put a final nail in the coffin to the Navy game. Look ahead, like you mentioned, Chris, against South Florida, and potentially rest down the season. We'll also take a look down the American Athletic Conference. So we'll pick things up, but I do want to give one final shout out to our primary sponsor in the Saxenian family for being the primary sponsor, not only for this episode of Let's Rage Coogs, but for 5 episodes of Let's Rage Coogs during the football season. And they will also be the primary sponsor for the first 5 men's basketball shows once their season tips off. Once again, less than 3 weeks away. Actually, we're really close to just 2 weeks away until the basketball team tips off against Northern Colorado on November 7th. And I do want to point out, for anyone interested in sponsoring, be sure to contact Let's Rage Coogs at gmail.com. All lowercase, that's LETSRAGECOOGS at gmail.com. On that note, we enter our final segment here of Let's Rage Coogs. Potentially we could even hear from Dana Holgorsen if UH Athletics can get that clip in on time. If not, we'll roll with the punches. But whatever. Next week we'll be back at TDC Stadium, so we'll have that clip of Dana Holgorsen post-game reaction. But just overall, final thoughts on Houston Navy and looking ahead at South Florida, and we'll also look ahead at the conference. Anything else that you guys wanted to add in particular? We've talked a little bit about everything in particular to the offense. I guess one final point that I want to make when it comes to Sam Brown and Keyshawn Carter, 2 players that Dana Holgorsen pointed out, going back to his availability on Monday, his weekly news conference, where he said in particular, going back to the game against Memphis, where both of those players had some really good plays. Keyshawn Carter had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and he had the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter that helped Houston defeat Memphis. I think he said those 2 those two players in that game against Memphis did tremendous to be able to build up their confidence. And he said the previous week during Houston's bye week was the best week of practice that both of those players had leading up to this matchup against Navy. And you kind of see that confidence carry over. And most importantly, you see the confidence in Clayton Tune with both of those receivers, because he's starting to be, again, like we've mentioned throughout the show, he's starting to spread around more and he's starting to look to them. And most importantly, Dan, like what you said, they are making big plays, and kind of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, for the lack of a better phrase, just more confidence all around, more plays being made by all of them.
Yep, by all of them, man. I think when players know that their role has increased and they're going to get playing time, they're going to practice harder. And so I think that's the thing that what we heard and probably what he saw. And I think we've been saying this pretty much all year. I think more chances for the receivers to make plays downfield, whether that's play calling, whether that's quarterback play, whether it's offensive line, different factors that all play into it. We've been wanting to see that, and we've been seeing that over the last 2 games. And so let's keep it continue. Keep spreading the ball around, because it's a recipe for success. I mean, we don't just want to see it because we like it. That's what you need to do to win. And when you got Tank, who's been the best player on the field every game that they played this season while he's been on the field, you know that he's going to roll coverage. You got to get your receivers in favor of matchups and when they can win and give them opportunity to win. And they've proven they can win those matchups. So now let's just keep it going all the way around.
And let me say this. It was a good win. It was good performance by the coaches for play calling. I think they were more aggressive. The receivers caught passes. They got open, ran good routes. The line did a better job. Defensive line did a good job consistently throughout the game up front to open it up for the linebackers. So that's a plus against Navy. It's Navy. Yes, we know that. But it's a win. 18-point win. You'll take it. It wasn't double overtime, triple overtime, anything heart-pounding, anything like that. They got another Coogs, another team they're better than next Saturday, homecoming. 30,000, Andy. I'm putting it out there, 30,000 inside TDECU Stadium. And let me also say, I'd be shocked if it is 30,000 people there, 30,000 fans, because right now we don't even know the kickoff time yet. So because that won't be announced till probably Monday or Sunday evening. So that's going to be a problem.
Well, what about this? Is a good question. Will there be more people outside tailgating or inside the game?
Oh, well, I got a comment I want to make, but I'm not going to say it on record.
Say it, Chris.
No, because it's not quite with this sport. So, so y'all know what I'm talking about with that. But yeah, next game against South Florida, they're 1-6. SMU's under 500. Temple's under 500. That's the next 3 games for the Cougs. So they could go on a winning streak, go to 5-1 in conference. I'm not sure what that says about the Cougs. They'd be 5-1, beating teams they're better than. So that's not great competition, but beating those teams is way better than losing to them. So,
Another thing to think about, we talked about earlier, remember when President Renew said she fired coaches who wins 8 games. And if they went out, he might meet his quota.
Dana Holgorsen will get to 9-3, and that'll be the mark that saves Holgorsen's job. I kid. I think Holgorsen's here to stay regardless of that 8-4, 9-3 mark. But I think at the end of the day, Houston, all jokes aside, I think they're in a really, really good position now. They do have to take care of business, and again, not everything was all fine and dandy against Navy. There was that stretch during the third quarter where they had those lapses where they were turning the ball over and with fumbles. Those are just stuff like right there where that can't happen when it comes to 4 different times that a player fumbled, 3 of them which were recovered by Navy, and that could very much cost Houston down the line against much tougher opponents, because it has already cost them in the past. So that's going to be something they're going to be looking to clean up. Staying with the positives, I think the number one thing, and we touched on it earlier in the show, when it comes to penalties, Houston only had 4 penalties accepted against them, which is the lowest by far all season long. So that's been a step in the right direction that they've continued to. You slowly see that transition. It was the first 4 games where they committed 10 or more penalties. Then it got down to 9. Then it went down to 7, and now it's down to 4. So there, right there, you like to see that trend heading in the right direction. Now, Dan, you talked about tailgate, and regardless of when the kickoff is, whether it's at 11 a.m. kickoff or if it's at 2:30 p.m., it's going to be a gorgeous day. At least when it comes to the early forecast, it's going to be lows in the 50s early in the morning. The high will only be 74, so it will be perfect weather for football. The fans do not have that excuse for TDCU Stadium next week.
And he's adding to his bag now. He's a meteorologist. Now he's giving weather forecasts. How about that? All right.
One of these days, I'm gonna get a green screen.
Hey,
I'm gonna have it.
Voiceover. He does voiceover. We heard him on the intro. Andy, man, you a bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
so you said so it's going to be sunny next Saturday as well?
Yes, sir. It'll be sunny. It'll be off the heels of a cold front that happens on Friday, a cool front. So
Okay.
it'll be a gorgeous day on Saturday, at least this far out. Looking ahead at the forecast. But I mean, if it does stick like that, it would be a gorgeous day for football.
And I'll put this out there as well, based on either 11 a.m. or 2:30 p.m. kickoffs. If the weather's going to be cool and pleasant, the World Series, assuming the Astros get there, which we think they will not be until that evening, correct?
Correct.
So that won't be an excuse either, Cougs/Astros fans. Y'all can get to TDECU Stadium, have a few adult beverages, either at 11 or 2:30, sober up by 6, and go watch the Astros. So that's not going to...
If they're playing at home, I'm not sure when game 1 and game 2 would be, but they could even take the train that's right by TDCU Stadium to Minute Maid Park. All convenient at Houston. I think by then they might probably be on the road, but I haven't thought of the schedule. But anything on that note, I do want to add one final stuff. Once again, big shout outs to the defense. They continue to play with their swagger. And like you mentioned, Chris, Donovan Mutin finished with 13 total tackles. He had 5 of them that were by himself on his own. Elias Bell continues to have a strong season, and he's really had big plays. He was the player that had the big sack to end the game against Memphis, so he continues to have a set of play, and he's been one of the most versatile players since the injury to Derek Parrish and a lot of the other injuries that Houston has sustained throughout the season. There's been talk he's been moved, outside at defensive end. He's moved inside at defensive line, and he's just been the versatile man up front for Houston on the defensive line. So big props to him in the game he was able to put together. For Houston, he was recorded half a sack with Nelson Caesar's alone sack of the game for Houston against Navy, and then Jace Rogers, the other player that continues to make plays. He had the kickoff return against Memphis. He had the interception against the Midshipmen today. One final thing, when we look across the conference, Tulsa and Temple played yesterday on Friday, and Tulsa defeated Temple 27-16. Now, those are 2 other opponents that Houston has left in their season. Temple's just November 12th, and Tulsa's the final regular season game. Senior Appreciation Day for Houston at TDCU Stadium, Thanksgiving week, November 26th. So those are 2 opponents there that Houston will see in the near future. But Tulsa came away with the victory. You mentioned it, Chris. Cincinnati was able to hang on against SMU, defeated them 29-27. And obviously, of course, the final score here, or not here in Maryland, Houston defeated Navy 38-20, Memphis and Tulane. We already saw there that Memphis was in a huge hole. I guess we'll do a score update right there for Memphis. It is now 28-0 for Tulane. I mean, give props to Tulane, man. And Willie Fritz, what he's been able to do there. This is the first game that they've had being ranked to the top 25 in the AP poll in a really, really long time, and they're making the most of it. And then UCF and East Carolina, they will tip off at 6:30 p.m. Central Time from Greenville, North Carolina, and those are the remaining teams that will play for the American Athletic Conference this week. And that's going to do it for this episode of Let's Rage Coogs. We never got that Holgorsen clip in on time, so can't wait for next week whenever we're much more in control of that. Dayan, I'm going to toss it over to you. Actually, Chris, I'm going to toss it over to you first. Where can people find you, sir? And thank you again for being able to allow us to use the platform and be on your channel.
As always, my pleasure to have the platform to provide for you guys for Let's Rage Cougs on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel, HoustonRoundballReview.com, Houston Roundball Review on Instagram, and now Houston Roundball Review on TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok now, Houston Roundball Review on TikTok. I'm not going to dance, not going to do anything like that. I might sing if I ever get the feeling to do that again. Who knows? But I'm not dancing. But all those 3 platforms as well. Tonight on the Houston Roundbar Review on YouTube, we have a Rockets postgame show after Rockets play the Bucks. So tune in for that. And of course, tomorrow, also on the Houston Roundbar Review on YouTube, Folks Talking Sports. We'll also talk about more of Coogs Navy. We may talk about a certain scrimmage that took place today involving Coogs and somebody else. We may talk about that if we get some information. So you never know about that. But folks, remember, it is a scrimmage. A scrimmage, okay? So remember that, it's a scrimmage. But we're also going to have a special guest, Gabe Warren, the Rice Owls. We're talking about the Cougs men's basketball getting recruits big time. The Rice Owls doing their thing too. They got to commit. And he's going to join us tomorrow as well on Folks Talking Sports from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time.
Chris, real quick, before I toss it over to you, Dana, Chris, I saw your tweet earlier about, I guess this was yesterday when you were covering the Rockets game, and you noticed 2 people doing a TikTok dance.
Man, yes. They had to be like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old. She put her phone down against a pole, backed up, joined her friend, and they proceeded to do a dance routine together right in front of the admin section that enters at Toyota Center. I'm just like, so that is not going to be on my channel, okay? Trust me. Do not come to my channel looking for that. You'll be disappointed if you do. Don't do that.
Sign of the times, Chris, but it's good to see that the Houston Roundbar Review, is now on TikTok. And Dan, I'll toss it over to you. Where can people find you, sir?
Just like under my name or beside my name, you can find me on all social media, Dayon Dunlap. Always appreciate you guys joining you guys. Like Andy also always mentioned, make sure you like and subscribe. We got content on YouTube that you won't have anywhere else. It's exclusive. So make sure you like and subscribe. And you can't end an episode without saying go Cougs.